Good morning. My name is Philip Bain. I'm the Managing Director of Smart Cities Council. Today, we have one of our continuing Orange County Smart and Healthy Building presentations. As you know, Orange County was one of our Readiness Challenge winners from 2020, and this is part of an ongoing program around the building asset inventory for Orange County, which we'll discuss a little bit more. I'll introduce our speakers shortly. So I'll do some introductions, and then our panelists will be Vicki Worden from Green Building Initiative, Emily Thompson from USGBC, and Paul Shula, the president and COO of Delos. We also have Andrea Weseer, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for Orange County, and Jeff Benavides, who's the Chief Sustainability and Resilience Officer, as part of this panel. Panel really isn't the right word. This is more of a roundtable, and we'll try to have discussions across the board and ask questions as we go forward. For many of you, you know the drill. Just quickly, we've had about 8 of these sessions already here, and we of course had about 12 with Nashville last year. But our goal is to invite cities to provide information about their needs and then to help them accelerate project implementation. Our view is that the data shows that most cities, it takes about 4 years from concept to implementation. And if we can accelerate that to half the time or even 3/4 of the time, the residents, the financing entities, solution providers, everyone wins. Whoa, there's Jeff. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thank you. So we have as many as 50 additional cities on many of these sessions, and of course, many other academic, local policy experts and solution providers. This is just a list of previous winners, and I do want to point out that Central Florida has had a long history of winners. Orlando was one of the original winners, and Orange County has followed in his footsteps in the past year. So the current winners are Nashville, Tennessee, Orange County, and Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. You'll see this in the schedule, and I'll bring it up later, but after this public session, we're going to go into our private only meetings. There's an invite only meeting on July 20th with Orange County building management teams, where we're going to work on scoping the building automation for the whole county. So if you have any questions there and you're a city, please contact Connie. If you're an expert or solution provider, please contact Rosie Smith, who is new to our team, but she'll be handling those matters. This is the schedule that we've already gone through, and again, everybody will have this presentation. You can download it so you can review this. And then going forward, as I said, the next session is on July 20th. We'll have a public session in August around global city benchmarking and communications. Going back into September, we'll have invitation-only meetings where we review specific solutions. And then we're going to be having a private scoping workshop at Smart Cities Week in Orlando the week of October 4th. So again, more than willing to provide more information if you need it to participate. So when we're looking at smart and healthy buildings for Orange County, we're really looking at the 3 components all around data, which is how do we collect, communicate, and compute the data. And this has been around for many years. Any of you that worked in the smart grid about the transformation of the energy infrastructure know that the process and the workflow of collecting and managing and analyzing data is very similar. So we're taking a holistic approach. We're looking at every aspect of a building. But we're also, so I talked about this descriptive, prescriptive, and predictive. We want to know both historical reporting, real-time optimization, and predictive analytics. And our guest speakers today will be focusing on some of this, and particularly the area of wealth and well-being. Did I say well-being? I meant well-being. So what we're talking about also is not what happens just inside the buildings, but also between the buildings, the spatial, the community data around vitality, what actually makes the buildings worth visiting, worth having retail, office space, etc. Now, recent research, there was just some research that came out this week from Wired Scored that said over 80% of people who work in offices really expect those buildings to be safe and healthy. They're expecting that before they go back to work. It's really interesting that you hear on TV about a lot of CEOs talking about their personnel having to come back into the workspace, but often not talking about what it takes to make that workspace welcoming from a safe and healthy standpoint. So Jeff Benavides, who's on the camera, Chief Sustainability and Resilience Officer and our primary contact on this project, will be asking questions and helping us here, and we'll have a few words to say before our speakers start. Andrea Weseer will join us shortly. She's the Chief Innovation and Emerging Technologies Officers. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and then I'll introduce the speakers.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Philip. And again, thank you to the speakers that are here today. I'm so honored to be sharing the stage here with you all, and I'm so excited to hear this conversation unfold. It's actually really odd, and just the way things work, that this session is happening today. Just last night, I was at one of my alma mater universities, the Rosen College of Hospitality Management for the University of Central Florida. And for those of you that may or may not know, I went to school for hospitality and tourism management as a huge passion of mine. And being here in Orange County and being like one of the top destinations in the world, we really wanted to do, and I always have my heart in hospitality management, and I try to engage with the school as much as possible. But it was really interesting discussion that kind of relates to our discussion here today about health and wellness, and the expectations of health and wellness on the hospitality industry now has been, the impacts have been catastrophic, and the future of hospitality is, it's not like the product is going to change much, but there's the way that we engage guests and the way that experience happens has definitely been impacted, and will affect the travel and tourism industry incredibly, as well as restaurants and bars and nightclubs and concerts and all the meetings and events. So it's very timely discussion for us to have this discussion today. As you all know, we have one of the world's largest convention centers here in Orange County that provides about 30 to 40% of our total tourism development income revenue here for the community. So it's a huge economic engine. And this is kind of the questions that we've always been asking ourselves as we have facilities opening up. We're building new parks facilities, building new community centers, and of course the convention center, as well as that main staple for our community. What do we need to do to keep that competitiveness and people comfortable in those spaces, and really use this opportunity to enhance those spaces? So that's why, as Philip mentioned, we're really focused in on these deliverables for automation systems, Internet of Things, doing sensorization for security, health, and wellness, and really trying to get our whole mind around what does this community of tomorrow really look like, given the last 18 months, and how do we push this forward into the community. The last thing I'll mention is a big thank you to those folks on the call. Maybe not you directly, but the other folks that work in your organizations have been incredibly helpful here in Central Florida as we've really pushed forward green building policies here in the last 5 years. The city of Orlando was one of the first to enact a benchmarking ordinance and disclosure ordinance for energy and water, as well as launching a green building incentive program for new construction facilities. And then our neighbors to the south in Miami were one of the first ones to require any type of building certification with all new construction facilities, and really trying to push that in the Southeast here as a huge market moving forward. So I just wanted to say thank you, especially to the folks at the Well Building Institute and the USGBC and GBI and other partners that have been part of this initiative over the last 12 years. And I'm a proud product of the work at the grassroots level. So with that, Philip, I'm really excited to dive in here and hear some of the updates from the team.
Great, thank you very much. So our first speaker will be Paul Shula from Delos and IWBI, the Wellness Institute. Paul, why don't you take it off?
Great, thanks for having me, everyone. Happy to be here. This is Paul Shula, founder and CEO of Delos, and founder of our International Well Building Institute. That is the world's largest certification body for healthy buildings. After 5 years of extensive research, over $100 million of research capital put forth, pulled in Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, and hundreds of doctors of different disciplines, got them together with real estate professionals of all types, owners, operators, developers, architects, engineers, facilities managers, HR professionals, to best understand our indoor environment and its impact on the human condition. The research period, again, was 4.5 to 5 years and ultimately led to the launch of the Well Building Standard in 2015. Well has proliferated globally. The program now has seen 2.7 billion square feet of adoption in over 100 countries. Everything from corporate headquarters, large commercial office towers, hospitals, schools, stadiums, mixed-use facilities, every typology in real estate is covered. And it's interesting because we're seeing the vast amount of adoption now beyond existing buildings, certainly not only a new construction program. At this, I would say at the start of last year with the onset of the pandemic, industry folks asked our International Well Building Institute to serve a role, asking if we, as the world's largest certification body for healthy buildings, if we could zoom in and create a sub-designation focused specifically on health and safety protocols. As you may know, the WELL standard covers everything, again, you can imagine, that surrounds people inside as it pertains to their health and well-being from an operational and a spatial standpoint. Air quality, water quality, lighting, thermal elements, acoustics, biophilic elements, operational protocols, HR policies, about 100 features total. What we did early last year was zoom in and pull 15 relevant features forward of the existing 100 that stand up quite well with regards to health and safety concerns, pathogen compliance included, added an additional 6 criteria, and launched the Well Health Safety Rating. This was initially put forth in early February, led by a task force, U.S. Surgeon General Richard Carmona, Dr. Stacy Riza, who's head of Mayo Clinic staff, and over 500 virologists, behavioral scientists, public health experts, building scientists, all convened for a 4-month period to create the criteria of the health safety rating. This rating launched in late summer. This is a third-party verification, primarily of operations and management. So there are ways to achieve this rating without a capital expenditure, if you will. This is putting structure, science, form, validity, and most importantly, third-party verification of good practice. Categories such as cleaning protocols and frequency therein, emergency preparedness planning, continuity planning, stakeholder engagement and communication, health services, and air and water quality management and optimization. Once the rating was launched, we started to see significant adoption across the board, all typologies, and everything, guys, from a nail salon up to an airport or stadium and everything in between. JP Morgan Chase has now put the WELL seal on all 6,000 bank branches and global offices, T-Mobile retail stores, Hard Rock hotels, Yankee Stadium, Empire State Realty Trust, including the Empire State Building. Approaching 100 of the Fortune 500 in terms of tenants, occupiers as clients of WELL. And we're seeing this across the board, whether it's landlords and asset managers or occupiers alike, achieving the WELL Health Safety Rating. There has been over 1.5 billion square feet registered and starting to achieve the WELL seal since inception. This is a program that is being promoted heavily. We felt it was important to combine people of reach and influence with people of credibility and science in the form of a public service announcement type of campaign that has now garnered close to 4 billion media impressions, running nationally on 30 networks several times a day in a Look for the WELL Seal campaign. It's important to see this awareness start to build of the WELL Seal, the WELL Health Safety Rating, which has a QR code on it. So that seal on the front of any entrance of any building for transparency to any entrant, whether it's an employee, whether it's a consumer or customer or general public, what have you, can really take part in this movement and get educated and informed as to what it means when a building has achieved that third-party verified health safety rating. The interesting thing we're seeing here is the adoption curve is continuing to exponentialize here, if you will, vaccine or not, pandemic or not, and this pathogen concern will come and go as others come and go, but we're seeing a major tailwind here with regards to the interest in well and the well health safety rating from an ESG reporting standpoint. We are seeing Fortune 500 occupiers, asset managers looking at their levels of access to funding and needing to demonstrate material improvements in ESG reporting and seeing that the well portfolio of offerings really does a great job on human capital management, a lot of the features in the S bucket. So from a secular tailwind, if you will, this is, you know, a 5, 10 or decades long opportunity for folks to take a look at their portfolios and make enhancements, again, from a policy standpoint, become third-party verified and instill that confidence. From a standpoint of their visitors and their tenants, to show not only that they have put good practice in place, but those have been third-party verified, and B, to up the material reporting from an ESG standpoint. So we're continuing to see really strong adoption. The community of well accredited professionals continues to grow. Over 17,000 now registered well APs in 94 countries. And kudos to our IWBI team for continuing to advance this notion of how the health sciences and the building sciences converge. Well continues to be perfectly complementary to LEED. We see most of our projects become both LEED certified and well certified, really tackling the full holistic approach to sustainability, both from an environmental standpoint, from a green building standpoint, and also a human or biological standpoint. So it's a real pleasure to be with everyone today, and certainly look forward to answering any questions or providing further information on third-party verified health and safety compliance, if you will, for the built environment.
So Paul, one question I have, you know, USGBC is certifying buildings, as is GBI, but it sounded to me like you're certifying the processes within the building, and because you mentioned nail salons and stuff like that. So so I guess what you're saying, a tenant within a building, even if the building wasn't certified, could say, I want to certify my, you know, first floor, 9th floor, whatever else. Is that accurate?
Is accurate. There are programs for core and shell for entire buildings, owner-occupied situations as well, but also the well system works for individual tenants within a building, whether that building itself is well certified or not.
And to start that process, they go to, I was looking at your different websites. Which one do they go to?
Wellcertified.com. The International Well Building Institute is a separately governed, wholly owned subsidiary of the parent Delos. Delos funded all research and the construct, the 5-year build of the knowledge, and then ultimately created the public benefit corporation, the International Well Building Institute.
No, I was seeing that. So, and that's where they would go to get that certification. And again, it was interesting because you really focused, and I think that is interesting, on processes. Okay, that's cool. Anybody else have any questions? I know Paul had limited time, and I wanted to go to Vicki and Elizabeth when we could, because any questions from Paul would be further interesting. Vicki, I think you were going to go next. Hi, this is Vicki from GBI. Go ahead, Vicki, and I think you have your slides. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can you see my slides or not yet?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. Well, it's so delightful to be here, and I thank Phil and Connie and Jeff for having us today. And Paul did such a great job of explaining the well building standard, and my pleasure here to introduce you to Green Building Initiative and our primary way to deliver reducing climate impacts is through Green Globes. And so I'll just take you through a quick introduction. If you're not familiar with GBI, we have been in the US market since 2004. And our focus is on just improving the built environment and reducing climate impacts. We do that through exceptional education, tools, standards, and we do develop American national standards and assessment programs. And we do have a global network of individuals and organizations that are all working together to deliver sustainable, healthy, and resilient buildings. And through both Green Globes and our Guiding Principles Compliance Program, which is aimed at the federal sector, We have certified more than 400 million square feet of space in the US and Canada, and we're expanding globally right now. We have a 3-year investment plan, and we should be operational in Europe and Mexico, Central and South America and beyond within the next 18 months to 3 years. We're excited about that. At any time, you may have, or we may have, between 500 buildings progressing through certification. And as mentioned, our work in the federal sector includes extensive collaboration with the Department of Defense. We've certified a majority of the Department of Veterans Affairs healthcare facilities and a number of other agencies as well. And so we're really working in both private and public sectors in both United States and Canada. And Paul did a great job of talking about some of the ways that they assembled their criteria for the WELL standard. And similarly, the green building rating systems are have significant overlap with health and wellness, and always have. But you might say that energy and water have been primary drivers. But the pandemic certainly brought to light the importance of indoor air quality. We all knew it, but now everybody else knows it. So we have a super bright light shining on indoor air quality right now, and that has been the silver lining to all that we've experienced through the pandemic. The Green Globe's rating system has 1,000 points, and so what we do is we prioritize for design and construction teams or operations and facilitation teams those items that we want them to spend the most time focusing on. We had a lot of discussion with our clients and with our Green Globe's assessors throughout the pandemic about how to ensure that we were being adaptive to the needs of the built environment at that time. And so with our third-party assessment process, we have individual assessors that typically have about 25 years of experience in the field that collaborate with teams throughout the certification process. So they were able to discuss issues like the need to potentially focus more on ventilation, filtration, and cleaning. Ventilation being sometimes when we increase ventilation, we aren't necessarily always able to achieve our energy consumption goals as much as we'd like. So those conversations were able to happen, and our system is very adaptable and flexible to ensure that we didn't have to rush out and make any big changes when the pandemic happened. What we did do, though, is take the opportunity to make sure that through our assessment guidance, which we deliver through a live interactive program, was updated to refer people to the latest information to help them make decisions that reflected the lessons learned from the pandemic. We also were able to highlight new technologies that were on the market. And so there's a lot of really exciting work happening in terms of not only tracking and assessing the air quality as you walk into the building and having the sensors that have always existed there. We were able to highlight new things that came on the market, such as biological tracking of contaminants and airflow. And so we're able to refer to that in our assessment guidance and let folks know that it's available. We also just incorporate a number of things. As you go through a Green Globe's rating process, you're going to see significant overlap with all of the health and wellness focused rating systems. One thing I would say is that no matter what system you're using or what approach you're using, that communication is really key to building confidence and trust. So you can do all of the technological screening and testing and those sorts of things, and the labeling and the certifying, but if you're not communicating effectively with your tenants and with your residents and your occupants, they're not going to feel the benefit of that effort. And so anecdotally, I would say that the policies and procedures, and I think Phil picked up on this, the practices that are in place, which green building rating systems do indeed measure, as well as the systems. Those are the important things to be communicating as to what you are doing to ensure that your people that walk into your building understand exactly what is being done, whether it is around cleaning practices or emergency response, what happens when there are COVID incidents in place. That communications, I think, is absolutely key. I just wanted to highlight a few things here about Green Globes. We have 3 different rating systems. We have a sustainable interiors, and that's for tenant fit outs. We have new construction. Our new construction rating system is an American National Standard. We do develop our rating systems through a third-party audited consensus process, and we use ANSI for that. And Green Globes is the only commercial building rating system to achieve American National Standard status. We have Green Globes for existing buildings, and it's been in the market since 2007. We just recently released an update to that. It's Green Globes Existing Buildings 2021, and it is actually out in the market now, and buildings are being certified to it. And on a parallel track, we have it out for public comment. This particular rating system, it was 4 years in development. We had materiality analysis that began with an organization based in Europe. That evolved through a technical review process, and the resulting system has been benchmarked against all of the major rating systems in the United States. And so it does reflect the latest science and research. It also has an environmental social governance management section that includes resilience. And I would say that you're going to find with the 3 presentations, there's just a tremendous amount of overlap. We like to think of Green Globes as a 3-in-1 certification: sustainability, health and wellness, and resilience. And then with alignment, if you were looking at the UL, health and safety seal, or the WELL seal, the WELL building standard, or Fitwell, you would see, again, a tremendous amount of overlap. And I can't echo Paul enough to say that dual certification is a great option. And IWBI has recognized Green Globes within their rating system. We have almost 100% overlap with Fitwell, and we encourage our clients to consider dual certification. And the last thing a couple of things I'll touch on here is, again, just the breadth of building verticals that we have experience in, and how all of you out there listening are trying to apply both health and wellness and new technologies and sustainability, and also transparency to what you're doing. And so I would just encourage you to reach out to us. We'd love to have a conversation about what you're working on, but we have a tremendous amount of experience. We have certified everything from a 7-Eleven in Florida to the majority of the Las Vegas Strip. We just certified Charlotte's airport extension. We're thrilled to be working right there in Orange County and to be included in the benchmarking language that Jeff mentioned. Green Globes is mentioned in a number of local Florida jurisdictions. When it comes to policy, we really are working hard with every community, whether it's Alexandria, Virginia, or Orlando, Florida, to reflect that their policies should be open, because the market is changing. Innovation happens all the time, new technologies happen, and new rating systems emerge. And so we believe that openness in the creation of policies really helps everyone. It helps developers, it helps everyone to choose the way that works best for them to apply sustainability, health and wellness, and resilience to their buildings, and have that reflected through recognition. Last thing I wanted to mention is that we have 80+ Green Globes professionals that are available in Florida, and guiding principles compliance professionals, and we're happy to have Jeff among those. And Phil, I'll turn it back to you. I'll be delighted to answer questions and to participate further in the discussion.
Thank you. And before we go to Elizabeth, I just want to note that Andrea Weseer joined us. She's the Chief Innovation Officer for Orange County. And I have a question about innovation. So maybe Andrea will jump on this. You know, we're really interested, and I think one of the things that Orange County is really, it has a huge built asset inventory, you know, over 500 buildings, including the convention center. And it's been procuring, you know, all sorts of services and solutions and products for over 20, you know, 30 years. So what have you seen from the standpoint of innovation? You know, what have building owners done to tackle health and wellness issues? I think, yeah, I'd really be interested in what you see there.
So of course I am no Jeff, but what I was going to ask was something similar to the panelists as well, and that is that I think we've got two innovative fronts besides, you know, this opportunity to show sustainability for years here, right, to tourism and certainly within the hospitality markets. But I think what we also see is really how that relates to well-being. And so I think you see that in places like Lake Nona, where we've got this beautiful emergence of technology, human performance, and therefore, right, aspects of sustainability and how you can showcase that. So those are some, I mean, especially in that region, along I-Drive, certainly things that Disney has done in the past, right? And even Lowe's at Universal's property. But I do think you see some of those shining examples, and whether it's sustainable materials or, again, promoting well-being in the sense that sustainability plays a role in human performance, right? And whether that's in the workplace, but especially leisurely and as you enjoy your vacation. So I think that's some of those aspects there. And, you know, I'll let others answer, but I'd love to, you know, basically. No,
I'd be interested in what Vicki and then Elizabeth think about that. So what have you seen that's been innovative?
Yeah.
Vicki?
Yeah, I'm thrilled to answer this. So we've had a lot of experience lately working with multifamily properties and communities, and that, you know, that could include resorts as well. But through that, there are some really amazing innovations happening. And I think one of the things we talked a lot about during the pandemic were the food desert situations where people just couldn't leave their communities. They couldn't access healthy food. And we were really struggling with how to deal with that. And we're working with portfolio owners now that are really taking a strong look at hydroponics. They're testing it in their communities and getting a great response from their residents. And so they're working to try to figure out how to bring that out and bring it to scale. So when you're talking about portfolio owners that have, you know, not just hundreds, but thousands of buildings across the United States, that really will be impactful. The other thing I think we've seen a lot of is utility advancement in tracking utilities. And so there's also similar innovation in trying to get a handle on real-time reporting on water usage. So we have another client that is testing new technology that provides real-time to-the-minute data on what's happening with water usage on their properties, so that they can respond immediately if they have, for instance, even a toilet running, which could be gallons and gallons of water wasted if it's not addressed right away. And they're testing it out in some of their properties, and when they see that it works, they're really working hard to try to figure out how to put that into their capital improvement budgets and bring it to scale. So I feel like there's a lot of adventurous spirit out there, all unified right now behind environmental, social, and governance and transparency, and it is all just coming to bear, brought by, you know, need, by us all coming together at the same time to recognize the need.
No, that's great. So we'll let Elizabeth go, but Elizabeth, from USGBC, maybe you could start a little bit by talking about innovation also, because I do think that's a key issue. And one of the things I do want to note, I mean, I'm always sometimes confused, but sometimes impressed by the overall effort of many organizations to improve communities. But one of the things that has made USGBC unique is its community ratings, as opposed to just building ratings. So talk about that also, because most of the focus right now has been on buildings, but that's one of the things that with the LEED community standard that is significantly different. So with that, Elizabeth, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, great. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I'm happy to start with innovation and to share some of sort of where I think we are uniquely right now. And it is very much related to community and technology. One of the things I'll touch on a little later in the presentation is a tool that we have that does that monitoring of human experience and of utility data. And the combination of those two is sort of where we see the most crucial current goals that building owners and occupants have, the things they find most important. And I agree too with what Vicki said, that community is really at the heart of it. I think during the pandemic, we saw our ability to change on a dime when we needed to in many ways. And that's, I think, one of the things that, the Smart Cities Council, your goal of accelerating change. We know that we need to change 30 years ago, but where we are right now, it's really exciting to all be together here, to have lots of resources, lots of things to pull on so that we can make the best of where we are, collect the data on and know our benchmarks, and then be able to move forward more intelligently together. So I think that community piece, those conversations, as you said, are really key, and I'll get into that a little bit more too. Does that help, Paul? Is that a good start for where we can go?
That's a great start. So just go ahead and tell us when you want to move through the slides, and we'll go through. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with this one. So as Paul said, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a vice president of the U.S. Green Building Council, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Orange County is such an exciting place right now, and we're really glad to be one of the folks who are participating in the conversation. USGBC has a lot of tools that we're glad to bring to the table. As you mentioned, Paul, we've been around for a long time. We were founded in 1993, and in that time, the community has sort of welled up that expertise. People want to make a better world, and so being able to bring all of that expertise together, have those hard conversations about what's most important, and sort of develop a formula of how we move forward successfully together, and let that formula evolve as we learn more and as our community's needs change. So LEED is the most widely used green building rating system in the world. We're available for all building types, and Paul, as you mentioned, we have, in talking about WELL and the processes there, I think that both Green Globes and USGBC also certify processes, and so it's part of sort of the holistic look of how does it affect people's experience, how does it affect, for USGBC and Green Globes, how does it affect our bottom line of making sustainable and healthy places. So we're really proud to be a part of that conversation and to be a longtime leader in it. LEED certification is a globally recognized symbol of sustainability achievement throughout the world. So that's, it's a great baseline to begin with. And in terms of resilience, I think that this is something that, we've recognized as storms have come, that this is a key place where these conversations, this expertise needs to come and sort of bear witness to the challenges and help to move forward. A local example that I know probably lots of people on the call already know well is the Kilowatt Challenge, which was a partnership in Orlando between the USGBC's Central Florida chapter, the Urban Land Institute, AIA, and many others. And Orlando benchmarked and found that I think it's 952 of their buildings were responsible for 50% of their energy. And so they were able to focus on those buildings and help that portfolio to improve in substantial ways, beginning with the benchmarking. So we're glad to have lots of examples locally of how we've been able to work together on that. Another example is throughout the USGBC, we have
through the
network.
Slides, Elizabeth?
What's that?
Actually,
sorry. Go back. We're still on resilience. Thank you.
Okay,
So
sorry, I make sure we didn't lose any.
No
Okay.
problem. So if you could now, you're going forward, if you could go back.
No, go forward to the first slide, sorry. Just give us a second.
Sure, no problem. I can keep
Go
going
ahead.
and we can catch
Go
up.
ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So USGBC has lead professionals, and those are people who've demonstrated that they know they have a certain level of expertise. And people who demonstrated that over often decades, one of the criteria is that they can then become a lead fellow. That's a very rigorous application process and is a really select group of people who tend to show an ongoing commitment to that leadership role that they have. And our Florida-based lead fellows are working closely with the USGBC's advocacy team to determine how cities can spend the American Rescue dollars in ways that enhance long-term resilience and human health. So we're really excited to be united behind that goal. And then you could move forward one slide, and we'll be caught back up. Perfect, thank you. This diagram is pretty simple, but it highlights a few common strategies that enhance our ability to prepare for, plan for, absorb, recover from events, and help us to use the lead rating system at all the scales, from the smallest interior scale to the whole community, to incentivize assessment, planning, design, and incorporate specific technologies like passive survivability and backup power during disruptions. Another example is from the government building in DC, where I'm located. The U.S. Treasury received LEED Gold in 2011, and at the time of certification, it was the world's oldest building to certify using LEED. The building is 510 square feet, and it's decreased its potable water by 43%, its electrical usage by 7%, and its steam usage by 53%. And the best part, through many people's criteria, might be that it's saving American tax dollars an impressive $3.5 million per year, and of course also reducing its dependence on utilities. So that's one example of how we kind of try and take the diagram into day-to-day life and provide some benefits. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So when USGBC began, we worked with sustainability leaders to develop a systematic but flexible approach to identify the most crucial topics. And these became our credit categories listed here. Each credit category has evolved over the years as national and international conversations move forward. And USGBC is thrilled to continue to collaborate to decide where to benchmark on each of these topics. If you're new to LEED and you're interested in learning more about a specific credit category, all of the information on the different credits under these headings is available for free online. I practiced architecture for 15 years before joining the USGBC 10 years ago, and loved just seeing that evolution, kind of getting to learn for free about how experts were deciding this is what the best possible achievement is, and knowing what standards to reference. So it's great that all of that's online and freely available. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the USGBC, of course, has this big reach, and so every day we get to certify more than 2.6 million square feet. And that becomes a part of the community's conversation and influences how we improve it going forward. Next slide, please. Great. So this is ARC. This is the tool that I was talking about when I began. And we know that we can't, of course, benchmark success in an ongoing way. We can demonstrate it with the initial building, but then how do we demonstrate that the building is really performing to the level that it's designed to? We can install all the best, most efficient HVAC, but if we don't also train ourselves on how to operate it and give ourselves real-time data, then we're not as successful as we might be at achieving our goals. So ARC is built on a lot of platforms that they already use, like Energy Star Portfolio Manager, as well as you can plug in your own utility data. It's very adaptable. There are lots of different ways to collect your data, but it helps building owners and occupants and building professionals to get data on the building's energy, water, waste, transportation, and human experience goals. ARC, any city can register in the ARC platform and enter data for free. and then they can decide to continue to use that platform to compare results with other cities and decide whether they want to pursue LEED certification. So it's not just a tracking tool, it can also be a bridge to documenting a certification achievement. And a great local example of how you guys have used ARC in Florida is the Miami-Dade Public Schools, where Ben Weinstein and one of the contractors who's super familiar with LEED, CBRE, taught local students how to use ARC, and then they use that both in their local schools and at the University of Miami. So it's a very simple tool. Students around the country have used ARC in similar ways, and we're excited that students can help to push that forward in any capacity that they, or of course, building professionals would like to. LEED also has strategies that apply at the city level. There are a number of LEED certified cities, and they work, health is, of course, a key aspect of that, that a LEED certified city is also a healthy city, and these are some of the goals that we pursue. Understanding how it affects physical, mental, and social well-being, providing the framework, and using public health data to kind of provide that important feedback loop. Next slide, please. Thanks. We are really glad to see that sustainability continues to be a top issue that building owners want to pursue. I'm sure that will continue, and we're glad to work with anyone who has questions about how they can be a part of that conversation if they aren't already. Next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, for ARC Reentry, all of those accredited professionals that we talked about are, continuing to be a part of that conversation. And Reentry is our program that helps building owners to give the occupants some standards on what they are doing to make it a healthy and safe place to return to. Next slide. Great. And then these are our Safety First pilot credits. These evolved in conversation. They are available for free online. You can use just these if you don't want to do LEED. All of the information is just intended to sort of collect all the expertise and put it out there so that everyone can access it and move forward. Next slide, please. Great. And then bringing it back to resilience, there are a number of studies that the USGBC has engaged in with cities of different scales throughout the past 10, 15 years to sort of measure and share best practices on resilience. And I'm happy to share any of those that might be of interest. We have a number of partnerships with other nonprofits and continue to share research that we and those nonprofits do together. Next slide, please. And then lastly, in my role at the USGBC, I work with a team of LEED coaches, among others, and our LEED coaches are there to help projects and cities of any scale to track their work and help them address any stumbling blocks they might come across. That team is made up of people who are architects and engineers, building scientists, people who've sort of been on the side of the table where they're trying to get things done and know what impediments they are likely to come across and know what solutions LEED has to help them. So people are welcome to reach out to me anytime with questions.
Elizabeth, let's go back to the resilience slide. Can we keep that on for a second and go back to the resilience slide?
It might be like slide 3 or 4. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah.
There were. I think there was a diagram one, and then there's the sort of equation one.
That one that was just go forward. No, I'm sorry. Go back towards the end. Sorry for this, you guys. Just go back one more. Go. Okay. One more. Yeah, here we go. The community resilience. That's what I want to look at. So go back a slide, please. Yeah, okay. So you said you're working with other organizations to do this.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've done work in Puerto Rico and Texas on, post-hurricane, and then how do you make a community more resilient? And when you talk about social connectedness and not so much infrastructure or hard infrastructure, when you look at health and social connectedness, what are you measuring? Who are you working with in this area? Because that's the area I find to be the hardest to sort of impact, but probably the most sustainable if you're successful.
So what sort of infrastructure is there with social connectedness?
Yeah, so what are you measuring when you talk about health resilience and social connectedness? You said you were working with other organizations to do research in these areas. So I was wondering, you know, what are you measuring? What are you looking at? What kind of data are you using?
Yes, we might be getting a little bit of an echo, but we'll see. I think it's gone now. So we work with lots of different organizations, the American Institute of Architects, Urban Land Institute, as I mentioned, and different studies have different partnerships. And I'd be glad to provide you with sort of a list of what those are, and I'm sure we'd be glad to connect more with Smart Cities too. In terms of what we measure, I would actually need to dig into that a little bit and get back to you, because I'm not sure how. It is a good question on how do we measure social connectedness. And what
Well, let me give you some use cases or examples that just so, and anything you share with us, we'll share with the audience. So we had a session 2 weeks ago with Orange County and Nashville. And it was Nashville is looking at urban flooding. Orange County, as you know, is looking at safe and healthy buildings. But part of that, they're looking at overall what is a safe and healthy community. And we have a number of partners who you can look at both spatial data, but you can also look at what we call community vitality data. So you can do either social media analysis, you can do mobile phone analysis of location, and you can find out how people are using a community. So, you know, where do they walk? Where do they visit? And that really becomes important. Like, so for instance, we were looking at this for Nashville because you would have pre and post flooding travel patterns. You would have pre and, you know, like maybe a grocery store in a community gets destroyed. And so now people have to take the bus and go 10 blocks or 20 blocks or 30 blocks to get groceries. And so I'm not seeking to answer that right now, but I do think, I mean, from my experience of working with cities and the work we did in Texas and Puerto Rico, that understanding how the human experience is of a disaster and how they respond to it becomes just as important as the physical infrastructure. And that's what that was pointing to. And that's why I was so interested in possibly what benchmarks were you using? Because how do you measure? I mean, we're trying to develop some measurements around. So let's say, you know, you had a place where people could go and get their groceries or their drugs or the prescription drugs or their, you know, whatever. And now all of a sudden those are gone. And it could be from a cybersecurity attack just as easily as it could be from a hurricane.
Yeah, I don't know the details of how we do that, and I would love to find out and get back to you. And locally, I volunteer a bunch in my little community, and we definitely saw technology as a key part of that. You know, groups sprung up throughout the pandemic to help people get groceries if they were older and didn't feel comfortable, or just, you know, it was harder for them for some reason to get to the grocery store. And there were a lot more buy nothing new groups where people, you know, traded things that they needed, whether temporarily or long term. And to get to see that rise in the possibility of change, the way that things just get set up overnight online and were helpful for people in really substantial and meaningful ways. I don't know how we track that, and that's a really good question. I love that you guys are thinking about it.
Don't get me wrong, it is really hard to find the right data. And then even when you find the data, the question is how do you benchmark it? You know, how do you analyze and benchmark it? So, so I was just interested in maybe what you all had done in this area. Andrea or Vicki, any questions for Elizabeth or further discussion?
I just had a comment, and then I'll turn it to Andrea. But the group that we're working with, and I suspect Elizabeth, USGBC is involved too, is led by the International Code Council on. They're working on community resilience. So there are so many different dimensions, and as Elizabeth's slide shows here, you know, it's going to take us all working on some aspect of it and then connecting. So we are working with the International Code Council. Sarah Yerkes there is leading an effort around this in her team, and then the National Institutes of Building Sciences is also really involved in coordinating information, as is AIA, and Elizabeth mentioned AIA. And so I would encourage folks to reach out and get connected with those organizations if they want sort of the latest on community peace. The one thing that struck me, and I haven't, someone else on our team is attending those calls and is probably much more articulate on this, but the one thing that struck me is like even probably 4 years when this group started, before we even conceived of a pandemic, Target Foundation was really involved in this discussion and looking at it from the standpoint of, we are at a center point in a lot of different communities. How can we play a role in shelter, food, all those different things. And I think that did play out to a lot of extent in terms of the pandemic being, a national disaster, and having communities really struggle with how to recover, and having the U.S. government try to figure out how to deploy strategies that helped people. And a lot of times it was through those centers. So I encourage the connectivity and the communication on that front.
No, that's really useful. Andrea, any questions from you? I mean, I know these are continuing issues in many communities.
Absolutely. Well, just related to this exact slide and on this resilience guide, I think it's more of a statement, but it would be really interesting to see if we could kit this, because, we act as such a hub for conventions that come through, and we host so many, right, of an international audience. I think it'd be really interesting to capture, what is within the guide, and then of course, what are those outcomes, right, and what has worked, and basically teach that and offer that as a professional development opportunity in a variety of these groups that come through here. And I also am really interested in the social connectedness, because, whether it's resilience or even just back to sustainability in general, I'm always interested in the social connectedness of, say, EV drivers, right? I'm part of that crowd, and how we rely on each other before we go out of our way to unfortunately run into battery issues, right? So, any aspect of the social connectedness within the sustainability resiliency area, I'd love to hear more about as well.
Well, when we were doing the work for Nashville, the 4 areas that we identified where most cities do work, there was response, critical response. That was always like code red, and how do you respond to the crises? Then there was what we call gray infrastructure, which is in the water sense, what are the waterways like? What's the water infrastructure look like? And then there was green, do you have, do you use biophilia? Do you have places where water can congregate? Do you have berms? What do you do from a natural standpoint? But the thing that was missing that we really started to focus on is exactly what you were talking about, Andrea, which is, and I will say, I mean, I heard Vicki, I heard Paul and Elizabeth, there's a little bit of a bleed over now into this community aspect, but where I think an unresearched and an area that we're not spending a lot of time on, but COVID has told us is important, is what is the community's experience? And how do you respond to that? And it's not just about the physical infrastructure or the buildings. In some ways, it's not even the space between the buildings. It's the community that uses the buildings. And I know this can be a little bit nebulous, but there is some science out there. We've dealt with a number of companies now that have started to do research in this area. And it's around well-being, flourishing, happiness, stuff like that. And it will be interesting to see where our speakers today, where they take some of this, because they clearly have the standard. It's where people are going.
Phil, I think one interesting comment I would add to that is that when we talk about climate resilience and communities being completely wiped out by natural disasters, one thing that was really interesting to me was one of the Fortune 200 property management firms I spent a good bit of time with as they were working on their after action reflection following the devastation of Puerto Rico. And they went through everything from, having to find their employees, to having to make sure that their employees had water, to making sure that their employees' families had everything that they needed, because their employees were responsible for reopening all of those buildings, whether they were hospitals or, wastewater treatment plants. And so it was a really fascinating discussion, and something that that it would be really great to convene a group around, in terms of the fact that we have so many natural disasters that we've got to recover from as a community. Like those strategies, it's a constant churn of training and retraining.
And one of the reasons I bring this up, because FEMA has what's called BRIC grants, BRIC grants, and they're planning, I think, to increase almost by 25-fold the availability of these grants going into next year. And so a lot of it is around all of these communities' dimensions of resilience. I mean, again, many communities will stick to gray and green infrastructure. I mean, you're lucky if they'll do the green, but you'll say, yeah, we can definitely build a dam, we can, improve water infrastructure. And in the ARP Act that was just passed, there were billions of dollars set aside for water infrastructure. So, so the reason I keep bringing this up is because I think the FEMA BRIC grants could fund a lot of cities working on more of these community resilience, dimensions of resilience, as Elizabeth has identified. And that's why I'm interested, is because there's actually money that I think could help communities there. Great. So
Yeah.
Let me see, wait a second. I'm just, yeah, okay. Okay, cool. I am getting some questions around, Elizabeth. How do we measure these community dimensions of resilience? Okay. And
Yes.
so what I am going to ask is you and Vicki, and I'll reach out to Paul, if any of you guys have any, like, just, sources, links, anything that would help us look at how we're measuring different community dimensions of resilience. If you could please forward those to me, because we always do an article about the session and include the recorded link, and we'll have, links of interest and stuff. Believe it or not, Andrea, your question is like one of 3 or 4 around that. Yeah, so Andrea is asking the same thing. So anything you can help us with that, and we'll certainly source the answers back to whoever can provide them, but we really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I just real quick looked it up, and it's interesting, Vicki, that the story about having to find their employees, that first initial step, the prerequisite for this credit category and lead is a demographic assessment there and quality of life metrics. So it looks like it begins with that, and also incorporates environmental justice and affordability and civic and community engagement, as well as civil and human rights. So I'm happy to forward all that on.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. And we'll add some stuff too. So like when we're working with Nashville, we started with the CDC data around vulnerability. There are about 6 categories, and we used that first to see how urban flooding affected those individuals in those categories, and that was just a start. So no, this is, I think it's a fascinating area, and it's a new area to explore, and sort of follows up on what Andrea was saying. So with that, everybody, thank you very much for your time. I think there's a lot of interest in this community dimensions of resilience. So anything that anybody can provide us, we really appreciate, and we'll share it. So thank you very much for your time, and enjoy your day. Take care.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much, Phil. Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you, Andrea. Bye, Elizabeth.
Bye.